Hey there, and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
as mayor and as city leaders, let's claim our responsibility.
Mayor Johnson joins us to talk about his new plan for community safety, the migrant crisis, and much more. Plus, pushback to Chicago Public Schools' plan to move away from school choice. And now to some of today's top stories. 91 additional migrants have arrived in Chicago, this time by way of a private plane. WTTW News was the first to report that Texas officials chartered the private plane, which arrived at O'Hare Airport last night. Chicago officials had no warning the plane landed, so airport employees called the Chicago Police Department, according to a report. Police say two people identified as handlers in the police log fled the plane and jumped into an Uber before they could be questioned. It's unclear how much the flight cost and whether Texas paid for it with state or federal funds. The migrants are now staying at the airport, bringing the total living there to nearly 300. And a vigil is set to take place tonight for the 5-year-old boy who died after becoming sick at a migrant shelter in Pilsen. Jean Carlos Martinez Rivero died after suffering a medical emergency. Officials say the cause of his death is still under investigation. City and state leaders have called for a full investigation into Favorite Staffing. That's the Kansas-based company that's contracted to run Chicago shelters. The Pilsen shelter has faced complaints of unsafe conditions for those living there. The vigil is planned for 6 p.m. tonight near the shelter. Chicagoans living in nursing homes may be facing stark disparities in access to quality care. An analysis from WTTW News, the Hyde Park Herald, and Southside Weekly finds highly rated nursing homes are concentrated on the city's north side and have majority white residents, including the 3 that are circled on this map here. The only 5-star home, as rated by Medicare, on the city's south side also houses majority white residents. And of the 16 nursing homes with majority black residents in Chicago, 15 are 1- or 2-star homes. Advocates say the Illinois Department of Public Health has not met legislative requirements with staffing hour minimums and inspections. You can read the full investigation on our website. The Cook County Sheriff's Office is focusing on a new location to reverse opioid overdose deaths: gas stations.
I've overdosed at this gas station. I've saved lives at this gas station. And this gas station lies in one of the hot zones across the city of Chicago that experiences a high number of opioid-related overdose deaths.
Officials and community groups say a high number of opioid overdoses are reported from gas stations. So they're starting to stock 15 gas stations across the west side with the overdose reversal drug naloxone. Each station will start with about 50 units of the drug, where people can request them, no questions asked. Up next, Paris Schutz joins me to talk with Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Mayor Brandon Johnson recently released the People's Plan for Community Safety that targets resources to some of the city's most at-risk neighborhoods.
This comes as the mayor and city are facing an avalanche of problems stemming from the migrant crisis, with a tragic death this week of a 5-year-old staying at a Pilsen shelter, and news today, as you just heard, that Texas is chartering planes to fly more migrants to Chicago. And joining us now to answer all of these questions and more, Mayor Brandon Johnson. Mayor, just a few things on your plate as you join us tonight.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thanks for joining us. And of course, we want to get into this community safety plan that you and your team unveiled recently. But we, as Paris mentioned, we've got to talk about the migrant crisis, and WTTW News learning that Texas is chartering a private plane that landed last night with just under 100 migrants to Chicago. What do we know about this situation so far?
Yeah, what we know is, as I've said repeatedly, the governor of Texas is determined to create chaos throughout the entire country. And this is after the city council passed an ordinance that I put forward to provide more structure, to provide more calm and some more coordination with how buses are arriving in the city of Chicago. And quite frankly, what's actually quite disturbing is that many of the individuals who are coming from the border, there's no coordination at the border either. So many of the individuals are not being treated, they're not being processed, they're not getting medical attention. So by the time they arrive in the city of Chicago, they're coming in quite severe conditions: cold, tired, wet, hungry, traumatized. The type of chaos that this governor is insistent on creating throughout this entire country. My administration in 7 months has literally stood up dozens of shelters. We have over 14,000 that are living in shelters right now. We're providing medical care, vaccinations, screenings. The Cook County government has been an incredible partner as we set up appointments for these families. We provide transportation for these families to get medical treatment. Almost 5,000 students right now in the Chicago Public Schools that we are educating. Most of them are pre-K to third grade. And so the city of Chicago has had to bear this incredible responsibility, while at the same time, the ignorance that's coming from the state of Texas is causing and breeding the type of chaos that not just the city is experiencing, but the entire country is experiencing.
And we'll talk about the shelters themselves as well. But we know the city has also cracked down on buses, fining and impounding those that drop off migrants outside of the agreed upon times and zones. What do you know about the impact of that crackdown so far?
Yeah, well, clearly the governor is trying to circumvent law. I mean, this is, lawlessness that he is engaged in right now. And again, the entire impetus behind this ordinance was to make sure that there was coordination that was taking place from the border and the city of Chicago. We have attempted in every possible way to provide the type of structure and calm to a humanitarian crisis that, quite frankly, is global. This is an international crisis as global population shifts take place all over the world. And what we're experiencing in the city of Chicago is a direct result of an individual who is not committed to that type of accountability. And so we've put forth very clear guidelines. You can drop families off. Buses can come to the city of Chicago between these particular hours. We have to have a 48-hour notice. We need a full manifest. We need to know who is on the bus, the conditions in which these individuals are arriving in, so that we can provide the type of care that's needed.
Are those rules being followed, or are they meeting that requirement?
Well, they're not following the rules, right? And what we have seen, and this is going to be a dynamic that's not just going to be throughout the state of Illinois, but really throughout the country, where we now have rogue buses dropping off families in the middle of the night in various cities and municipalities throughout the state of Illinois. The type of chaos and the disruption that the governor of Texas is determined to create and cause, we're doing everything in our power to deal with this very overwhelming international crisis that has placed the city of Chicago as a target by this governor simply because he doesn't want to adhere to law.
We mentioned the tragic death of the 5-year-old Jean Carlos Martinez Rivero. You did a preliminary investigation you put out last night saying there's no evidence of infectious disease at this shelter in Pilsen. We know at least 4 other minors were taken to the hospital with respiratory problems. There are a lot of folks at this facility. Some say it's way overcrowded. Is it safe to stay there, and are they getting access to any kind of medical care?
Well, again, my deepest condolences, for this family and to this family. The loss of a child, this is breaking all of our hearts. What I've said repeatedly is that this crisis, of course, that is being promulgated by the unruly behavior and the ragged behavior of the governor of Texas, has placed the city of Chicago front and center to deal with this humanitarian crisis that's international. And of course, when families arrive in the city of Chicago, we provide immediate on-site medical care. We provide vaccinations, infection prevention. Again, Cook County government is providing medical care as well. And we provide transportation to make sure that these families make their appointments.
Are you confident this shelter is safe, though, this Pilsen shelter?
Well, everything that I've done over the course of these first 7 months is to ensure the safety of all of the migrants that are arriving here. And, the concerns that people have expressed, these aren't new concerns. Remember, there were 4,000 people living on floors in police districts. There were ambulatory runs that were happening there. That was unhealthy, it was undignified. I've eliminated all of our police districts. We did that within my administration, turned this thing around in 7 months. And remember, there was no budget that was appropriated from the previous city council. So not only did I have to stand up a new shelter every single week, we had to put forth appropriations, and then we had to renegotiate a contract with favored staffing to ensure that we're providing equitable
and
services.
they're the
for
ones
families.
staffing this shelter, $40 million contract with them. There have been reports about how they've billed the city for 80-plus hour work weeks. Are they culpable at all for what's happened at this shelter? Are you confident in their work
Well,
going
we
forward?
have real serious control over how we actually measure, outcomes, and of course, we're constantly working to make this situation better. But make no mistake about it, the conditions in which families are arriving in are a direct result to the chaos that's at the border. And what we've said repeatedly, there has to be a coordinated effort, not just for the city of Chicago, but cities throughout the entire country that are dealing with this crisis at the hands of an individual who is elected to protect and to serve and to honor the interests of our country. And he is circumventing all of that.
An environmental report, Mayor, now reveals that a potential base camp site at 115th and Halsted is polluted with contaminants from an underground fuel tank. Will those plans be halted to build that site there?
Well, look, as I've done, we have scoured the entire city of Chicago looking for space and property to be able to confront this crisis. And working with our partners at the county level to provide services, the governor has made a commitment, I believe, to 2,200 beds to help address this crisis. And of course, I'm going to continue to assess all of the property, and the property that is best situated in order to meet the demand of this moment. We're going to make sure that every option is still available to us.
You recently launched the People's Plan for Community Safety. It's your strategy for reducing violence, targeting some investment in some core neighborhood areas. So how is your plan going to be different from what Mayor Lightfoot tried to do, what Mayor Emanuel tried to do?
Well, look, this ongoing debate on getting at the root causes of violence, this is not a newer development. Remember, it was Lyndon Baines Johnson that actually made it a very strong point to get at the root causes of violence and crime in the country. And of course, Governor of Alabama ridiculed him and basically said that Lyndon Baines Johnson believes that people are participating in crime because a 10-year-old did not have enough watermelon to eat. And so what I've said repeatedly, that we have to make sure that we are centering our work around people. That's what this plan does. We also are centering our work around places. We have looked at neighborhoods where violence is pervasive, 35 very violent beats, while also looking at where schools have been closed. So this combination of where schools have been closed, where disinvestment has run rampant, where violence has been pervasive, this is where the investments need to take place, and this is where the partnerships come in handy. So the full force of government, all of our sister agencies, all of our departments that I oversee, along with our business community, our philanthropic community, the full force of government with partnerships from faith, from labor, from community, from philanthropy, from business. The difference is you actually have a mayor who believes in not only getting at the root causes of violence, but also you have a mayor that believes in investing in people. And I've done that within the first 7 months of my administration.
Mayor, something we're going to talk about a bit more coming up in the program. Your appointed school board passed a resolution to create a 5-year strategic plan that would eventually shift away from school choice, as so many CPS families are familiar with it. What does this mean for example, parents of children who attend selective enrollment schools? What can they expect?
Yeah, what it means is that children who attend neighborhood schools are not going to be ignored. That's what it means. I say this often, particularly as someone who's been a public school teacher. The first mayor likely in history, certainly in modern history, who actually sends their children to public schools. I have a vested interest into making sure that our schools are fully supported and funded. But of course, as W.E.B. Du Bois said, that public education at the expense of the state is a Negro idea. And what he meant was, this is a whole 2 generations ago, that we have to invest in public accommodations. What I've made a commitment to doing is to make sure that our neighborhood schools are not left behind, that every single school should have access to all of the amenities that any other school has in the city of Chicago. And I'm committed to bringing that type of equity and justice to our public education system, because working people of the city of Chicago deserve that.
Mayor Johnson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Up next, the debate over Chicago Public Schools' plan to move away from school choice, as we just discussed. But first, a look at the weather. In a major departure from past policy, the Chicago Public School Board announces it intends to move away from school choice. In Chicago, families can apply to attend schools across the city versus being required to attend their neighborhood school. Critics say that means neighborhood schools lose out to better funded competitors as a result. Here's CPS Board Vice President Elizabeth Todd Breland at a meeting explaining the reasoning behind the planned shift.
Despite a myriad of education reforms over the course of many CPS strategic plans, we have challenges and gaps that have persisted. Our school choice system that we operate was built on this foundation that existed already of structural racism and socioeconomic inequality. And it has provided opportunities for some, but our data is showing that it has also exacerbated inequities.
But not everyone wants to see the current system dismantled, with some saying that giving parents choice has led to better student outcomes. Joining us now to share their views on this are Andrew Broy, president of the Illinois Network of Charter Schools, Cassandra Kachaha, board president at Raise Your Hand, Tara Stamps, Cook County Commissioner and Administrator of New Teacher Development at the Chicago Teachers Union, and Daniel Anello, CEO of Kids First Chicago. And we should mention we did invite someone from the Chicago Board of Education to join us, but they declined. Thanks to the four of you for joining us. Andrew and Cassandra, I want to start with you, please. First, what is your reaction not only to this announcement, but also the process that the board has undertaken so far?
Sure. My organization represents charter schools in Chicago. We have 122 campuses citywide that collectively educate 58,000 CPS students. 97% of those students are black and brown. We've had great success on the west and south sides of the city, increasing graduation rates. So we don't think it's smart to take away a policy that's driven such great gains. As for the process, this is done in a shroud of secrecy. There's no public vetting on this, no community input, no drafts released. We've got to fix that going forward, because right now, policy made in the dark doesn't make sense.
Cassandra Kachaha, same question to you. Your reaction so far?
Yeah, Raise Your Hand has always been supportive of the idea that every child in Chicago should be able to go to their neighborhood school, get a high quality, highly resourced public education. And so we welcome the announcement. While the announcement comes without the community engagement that you mentioned, we do expect that the next step is community engagement and that we will have an opportunity to weigh in on what the details look like. Because right now it's a vision, it's not a detailed plan.
And the beginning of the process, according to the board, something else that Elizabeth Todd Breland said in that board meeting, they say that this is just the start of the process. They are planning a lot more community engagement going forward. Does that response, does that answer satisfy you, Daniel?
No, I struggle with that. I actually think when you put out a resolution like this and you set a direction, and Kids First Chicago is really focused on making sure we're elevating and doing authentic parent engagement, they're essentially saying, hey, this is where we're going. And the only choice that parents really have in this case is how we get to whatever that destination is. If you were doing authentic community engagement, and if the resolution was living into the anti-racism, co-design, all of the different kind of buzzwords that I felt were laden throughout, this engagement process starts first. And for us, it's not about where we end up. We feel like the people who are most directly impacted, parents across the city, need to have a chance to voice where they want to go, but they didn't have a chance. It was the shroud of secrecy, yes. It happened behind closed doors, and decisions were made from a deference to ideology rather than a deference to the people that are going to be impacted by it.
During the board meeting, board members did say that a lot of this was the result of what they had continuously been hearing from community members. And I don't know if they meant, at board meetings during public comment sections or other meetings that they've started to add to the calendar. Commissioner Stamps, how do you think this transition should be managed?
I think that the people at the table are folk who have been engaged in a conversation around education for decades about what's in the best interest of black and brown children, who are often the recipients of this, what I deem as a false choice. As a veteran Chicago public school teacher, I was in front of babies for 25 years of my life. And I, as a mother, as a grandmother, what I see is their vision is the same thing that every parent wants, which is the opportunity that the school closest to their home is the best school for their child. I am the the commissioner of a district, which is really like a tale of two cities. On one end, you have Oak Park. On the other end, you have Austin. And in Oak Park, families can walk their children to school, children can bike to school. They often rave about the school system in Oak Park. But in Austin, that's not the same choice. Babies are put on buses at very early hours of the morning, traversing this city, putting them sometimes in harm's way in search of a quality education. And what's striking to me is when we talk about what's in the best interest of young people, often Black and brown young people, with this whole conversation about a quality education, it's always at the detriment of our children. That we are having to put our children, much like in the civil rights movement, when we had to put our children into schools that were hostile and violent because we sought to have a just and quality public education as promised to us under the law.
Some might argue, Andrew, that this move away from school choice, it's because school choice has had negative consequences towards neighborhood schools, and some that they have this ability to have a choice has perpetuated the inequities. How do you respond to that argument?
So I think it's a false choice. I think you can have fully resourced neighborhood zone schools thriving and a high quality charter school and public school choice regime inside the city as well. Keep in mind, what's tone deaf about this resolution is that the majority of CPS students attend a school that's not their zone school. At the high school level, it's 77%. And most of that's not charter, it's not selective, most of that is district school to district school. So parents are making choices and have agency. The great news is that 25 years ago, when we started this, the graduation rate in CPS was 50%, meaning 1 out of 2 students who entered 9th grade didn't graduate. Today, it's 84%. And that's not just data points. Those are thousands and tens of thousands of families who've benefited from having a choice of what's best for their child. And that's what every parent wants, and we support.
Cassandra, what might a shift like this look like? A shift away from school choice as we know it today?
Yeah, I hope that a shift away looks like resources in our public schools. Looks like every school having the basics, a library, a nurse, all those things that when you talk about the suburbs and the schools where parents just move there and their kid goes there, that's what they have. They look at a school and they say, this is what it takes to run a school, and they get that. We don't see that. We see parents making choices and sending their kids on buses because I know that the school at the end of my street doesn't have the basic things my child needs. I have a child in special education. Not every school can meet his needs, and that's not because his needs are so great. It's because we've made a choice to not create every school in every neighborhood equally.
And we've just disinvested from neighborhood schools. Yes, we know how to do schools right in Chicago. That's what's amazing. We know how to do schools right. I attended Franklin Elementary School, which is now Franklin Fine Arts Academy. It was down the street from my school. But by the time my daughter had children, my grandson couldn't attend that school because they drew boundaries that said even though he could walk to that school, because of selective enrollment, because of magnet schools, he could not go to that school. However, children that did not live in that community were bused into that community, my community, that could access that school. So CPS knows how to do school well. We have countless and countless examples, Walter Payton, Northtown College Prep. But what happened is once they lifted the dissent decree, even for that, where there was trying to create a more just and equitable ecosystem in a school environment, when those mandates were lifted, people did not do the right thing by children of color. So white children increasingly became enrolled in selective enrollment schools where they only make up 9% of Chicago public schools in the first place, but make up well over 40% of selective enrollment schools.
What about that, Daniel? What kind of impact could a shift like this have on Black and brown students in CPS?
I think it's a massive impact, and I think we are having the wrong debate. I think we continue to center institutions and the schools as those institutions, and we're not centering the people that actually have to live with the consequences.
Well, we live with the consequences.
Excuse me. From a standpoint of like who's going to be most directly impacted, Black and brown families across the city, the people that we work with and are engaging with on the west and southwest, northwest, southwest in the city in an authentic engagement process where we bring them to the table first, on a decision like this to actually decide where they want to go. And I feel like we made that decision for them, and now we're saying falsely that, okay, now you have to pick how you want to get there. That is not real, authentic community engagement. That is not going to reverse structural racism. In fact, we are going to perpetuate harm by doing that. We need to rewind and go have that conversation with them and then let them take us where they want.
Of course, the devil's in the details. It sounds like we're all expecting a lot more as far as community engagement goes out of CPS coming in 2024. Of course, I think we'll probably have to have the four of you back to keep talking about this because we'll have to leave it there, but there's a lot more to go over, of course. Andrew Broy, Cassandra Kachaha, Commissioner Tara Stamps, and Daniel Anello. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Back to wrap things up right after this. And that's our show for tonight. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 20 attorneys who have been named in the 2024 edition of the Best Lawyers in America.